Hello, everyone. Back to another episode of Ideation. I have alluded to this book before. This book, as you can see here, it's called Response, Freedom and Responsibility: The Search for Harmony, Human Rights, and Personal Dignity. The author is Patriarch Krill of Moscow. And in this book, just a quick reading of what it represents. In this book, he said two antagonistic systems are ranged against each other. One liberal, secular, humanistic, the other religious and traditionalist. Patriarchal draws on the bitter experience of the Russian people in the 20th century to illustrate the dangers of totalitarianism and how grave the break with one's spiritual roots can be for civilization. Basically, what I want to talk to you about today is the two ideas that he spoke about: the humanist liberal idea versus the traditional conservative ideas. I've heard persons parrot those ideas unknowingly to them. The same ideas that make up these two camps of a political ideology, those same ideas are being pushed via algorithms. Organizations pay millions and political parties pay millions, even billions, to use the technology of algorithms so that it could change persons' thinking. It can help persons to sway to one opinion. And like he said in the book, he said how grave the break with one's spiritual roots can be for civilization. And I've seen it right there in Saint Lucia, right inside of the place that's supposed to be sacred. We have the algorithms getting to us via our phones. And we cut down right between the middle, whether it is the family, and the Bible said that, whether it is the family, whether it is the workplace, whether it is the churches are not immune to the different political ideologies that's pushed by the algorithm. If you're a liberal and you follow liberal content, the algorithm gives you more liberal content. If you're a conservative and you temperamentally conservative in some sense, you get a lot of conservative content, and both of them have biases and both of them have points. So I've been following the idea of algorithm for a very long time, and I'm seeing that persons literally sound like the algorithm, persons literally sound like the liberal ideas, and persons follow narratives, and the narratives enter into the subconscious mind of individuals. So today, um, I want to just introduce a new way to break past those narratives. We don't know so much about the political algorithms. We don't know. I don't know too much about the algorithm, but I've been spending some time trying to understand it. And one way I realized that we can break the algorithm is by having public discussions. And recently, I've been entertaining public political discourse on Facebook. If you remember last week, I've been going at it within a respectful manner with Nimrod. I also speak to Jani. I also speak to Mr. Lionel Pierre. And we have to try, and that's why a majority of the debate now must be public, because if you remain in your echo chamber on your phone, your cell, you will be getting ideas that will stray you further away from reality, and participating in a public discourse based on what you think should happen, especially in the world that we live in today, especially what's with the disruptions that's happening internationally. The disruptions that are happening internationally will get to our doorstep. And one way to prepare is to understand what it is that we're dealing with. And I would like to start off a conversation, start off a public discussion, and it's not for self-aggrandizement, but it's to basically check my thinking. It's to basically check to see where we are. It's for our country. What is going on? Because our public media houses, I think they'll cut down the middle as well. They will cut down the middle. Every organization is cut down the middle via the algorithm of the technological algorithm, the ideas that are being funded so that it could get to your phone. So we can have a public discourse. And in this public discourse, we are going to introduce what we think is going on, and we can fact check each other in real time. And even I was looking at the 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 honorable Andrew Holiness, the Prime Minister of Jamaica. And he actually alluded to that in his speech at the 50th CARICOM anniversary. Go ahead and listen. He actually alluded to it. Listen to that.
And a new era of trade protectionism alongside rapid technological disruptions powered by artificial intelligence. Control over information platforms, standards, algorithms, and networks now influence economic power, national security, and policy autonomy as profoundly as control over physical resources once did. For small states, the risk of marginalization in this environment are real.
That's exactly what it is that I'm saying. And this is happening. The digital space will be influencing the physical space so much that we don't even understand yet. And this is happening in the international order. So I'm just going to go ahead and explore my position. Like I said, there are persons of interest that I'm speaking directly to. Like I said, Nimrod, like I said, Ajani, speaking directly to, and other individuals can jump on board if you're interested in having those conversations. We can start having those conversations. So to explore my position, I'm going to try to answer a question based on what happened. I don't know if we saw or if we saw what happened last week. Well, I'm recording this March 14th. Last week Saturday, we had the Shield of Americas Summit, where Kamala Prasad was invited, and the other regional presidents and prime ministers were invited to sign the document to sign the documents with Trump and America. So, my point of view is like the story of the legend of Arthur. I'm going to enter into the forest at the point that is at the darkest to me. And I'm going to explore the question, to what extent does the Shield of Americas Summit represent a modern extension of the Monroe Doctrine in the Western Hemisphere? So we're going to understand what this means. We have to break down what the Shield of Americas, what they represent, what's the purpose. To really delve deep into it, we have to know what the Monroe Doctrine is and what is the extension of the Monroe Doctrine. So I'm going to enter into the discussion to give my personal opinions based on what I think it's going on. So let's start something good. All right. Like I said, the logic of my arguments will be, what is Shield of Americas and the purpose of the Shield of Americas. To basically understand that, we have to first understand what is the Monroe Doctrine. And we all will come together at the end of the end of the video. So history.com editors, they wrote a piece explaining what the Monroe Doctrine is. The Monroe Doctrine, first outlined in the speech by President James Monroe to Congress in 1823, warned European powers not to attempt further colonization, military intervention, or other interference in the Western Hemisphere, stating that the United States would view any such interference as potentially hostile act. Over the centuries, the Monroe Doctrine has become a cornerstone to U.S. diplomatic and military policy. What this means, basically, America, President James at the time was the fifth president, and they were just amassing power. They were just becoming who they were to be. And we know what happened in Europe. Europe had colonized a very big chunk of the planet. And America, when they break free from that colonization, and we know Europe, this guy, Christopher Columbus, the Spaniards, all of them, when they had the slave trade, all of that. I don't want to go into that. I want to stay on the beaten path. And when they became free, America realized, hey, Europe might come in the Western Hemisphere and recolonize those states. So America said, this is my region. The Western world is my region, in so many little words. I am the top dog in that area. So you are unable, based on the Monroe Doctrine, you are unable to come and colonize any of the surrounding areas in the Western world. And you could see, based on the map here, you have the Western, North America, South America, the Caribbean, and all of them, Latin America, and Europe over there. And the countries that in Europe and Asia, you could see China, you could see Russia, and you're going to understand why I'm making that connection to the Monroe Doctrine, China, Russia, and the United States, and the document that was signed the document that was signed at the American Summit. So as it progressed, the Monroe Doctrine, it didn't remain what James wrote into it. It evolved over time. It adapted to fit the change, to fit the strength of the U.S. and the extension of the U.S. So the U.S. started extending its powers, its reach, its dominions, its dominance. Sorry, and it said that the Monroe Doctrine is up. National Archives said the Monroe Doctrine is the best known U.S. policy towards the Western Hemisphere. Buried in a routine annual message delivered by Congress by President James Monroe in December 1823, the doctrine warns Europe nations that the United States would not tolerate further colonization or puppet monarchs. The doctrine was conceived to meet major concerns of the moment, but it soon became a watchword of U.S. policy in the Western world. So it's adapted. So we're going to see the adaptation here. So the purpose of it's not the adaptation yet. So the purpose of the Monroe Doctrine was to make a unilateral statement of U.S. policy that would set an independent course for the young nations and assert a new role as protector of the Western Hemisphere. So in 1904, President Theodore Roosevelt, he had something called the Roosevelt Corollary. That word is very corollary. The Roosevelt Corollary. He adopted the structures to expand into more territory, taking greater responsibility. So as Roosevelt came in, United States had more power. He expanded the horizon, and they took in some more territory under the U.S. jurisdiction. And again, the National Archives said, while the Monroe Doctrine's message was designed to keep European powers out of the Western Hemisphere, Roosevelt would strengthen its meaning to justify sending the United States into other countries of the Western Hemisphere. As a result, U.S. Marines were sent into Santo Domingo in 1904, Nicaragua 1911, and Haiti 1915, ostensibly to keep the Europeans out. So basically, America is expanding. America is getting more power. America is expanding. America is taking up more responsibility via the Monroe Doctrine. So the whole western side of the world has been under American jurisdiction for the longest while. Some of it has been dormant based on things that has happened. They haven't been activating the Monroe Doctrine. But there was a time in 1962 under President John F. Kennedy, the Monroe Doctrine was evoked. It was dormant for a while. They knew that there were no European influence wasn't coming in the region. Well, it was coming in the region. They were not paying attention to it. It was not convenient for them at the time. I don't know why. But they invoked it in 1962 under John F. Kennedy, the Monroe Doctrine, the time of the missile crisis, when the Soviet Union began to build missile launch sites in Cuba. And the Soviet Union had to take it down because they had to dismantle the sites because America said, hey, this is my backyard. Soviet Union, your idea, we are ideological enemies. And what you're doing there is not safe to us. So you have to remove that. And this was something that was done. And you can even understand it some more via this video.
The Monroe Doctrine is an early cornerstone of U.S. foreign policy. It is steeped in ideas of dismantling colonialism and shifting global power dynamics in the 19th century. Its origins are simultaneously simple and complex. Let's start by meeting James Monroe. Before he became the 5th President of the United States, he fought and was wounded in the American Revolution, served in state and federal government, and held several diplomatic posts. Through it all, he believed firmly in the American experiment. And a doctrine is a principle or idea that influences a government's actions. Doctrines can become part of a country's foreign policy. The Monroe Doctrine began as part of an elaborate speech Monroe gave in 1823. So how did he get there? In 1812, the United States fought and won the Second War against the British. This win showed powerful European nations that America could defend and maintain its independence. But American independence was also tied to addressing the political volatility in its neighborhood. South of the United States, colonies in Latin America were fighting and winning their own independence from the Spanish Empire. Between 1821 and 1822 alone, 10 former colonies forged new nations. The United States couldn't afford to take a wait-and-see attitude. Could these new Latin American countries keep Europeans from recolonizing them? Somebody had to say something.
So you might be asking, but your question was about the Shield of America and what it represents to Monroe Doctrine. So now we are going to understand what happened at the Shield of America Summit. What happened there is what was signed there, in my opinion, and there's a lot of facts to prove it, is what is called the Trump Corollary. What was signed there was Trump Corollary. The Trump Corollary was signed at that summit. What he himself called the Monroe Doctrine. He changed it from the Monroe Doctrine to calling it the Monroe Doctrine. And you could say, well, this sounds a bit facetious, but then again, the Monroe Doctrine, as Wikipedia has it, Trump Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine, alternatively styled as Trump Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, is an interpretation of principles of President Donald Trump's foreign policy in Americas, an adaptation of the historical Monroe Doctrine. It describes unperceived desires by the second Trump administration to assert American predominance in the Western world. So you might be saying, but that could be Wikipedia propaganda. And I agree with that. Wikipedia is not the final source for me. In me paying attention. And I find, just to put this in here, I find a lot of individuals listen to a video. We should be very careful. We listen to a video to somebody giving the opinion, and the algorithm will give you that video for yourself because you follow in that ideological position. America has ideological enemies and America has ideological allies. Kamala Prasad is Americans' ideological ally. That's why she was invited, and all of them that were invited, they are on an ideological level represent what President Trump represents, his philosophy. And the document called the National Security Strategy of the United States, published November 2025. In this document states that in everything we do, we are going to put America first. What follows is a national security strategy to describe and build upon extraordinary strides we have made. This document is a roadmap to ensure that America remains the greatest and most successful nation in human history and the home of freedom on earth. In the years ahead, we will continue to develop every dimension of our nation's strength, and we will make America safer, richer, freer, greater, and more powerful than ever. When they say America, who are they talking about? The Shield of America Summit. At the end of America, at the end of the word America, they put a capital S. So that means the whole Western world. My reasoning, the whole Western side of the world tend to become America. Let's see if that's true, because I have certain ideas. Let's see if that's true. So in that national security document, it is said that we want to ensure the Western Hemisphere remains reasonably stable and well governed enough to prevent and discourage mass migration to the United States. We want a hemisphere whose government cooperate with us against narco-terrorism, narco-terrorists, cartels, and other transnational criminal organizations. We want a hemisphere that remains free of foreign or hostile incursion or ownership of key assets. And that supports critical supply chain. And we want to ensure our continued access to keep strategic locations. In other words, we will assert and enforce a Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. So it's here. He called it, I've heard Trump said that before, he called it the Monroe Doctrine. So basically, they're saying they're reestablishing the Monroe Doctrine and they're adapting it to give America a lot more dominance in the Western world, making the whole West under America's jurisdiction. Like I was telling Nimrod, we interpret those things based on an old order. We interpret what's going on in the world based on an old set of laws, an old set of principles. There are this document was published in November 2025. It's just March 2026. And they're acting on it already. So we were saying things they shouldn't do. In their defense, they consider going based on the law because it's in the law. They said they would establish that. And even a document by the White House, and he was talking about what was signed at the Shield of Americas. And here's some of the things that he signed at the Shield of Americas. He said criminal cartels and foreign terrorist organizations in the Western world should be demolished to the fullest extent possible, consistent with applicable law. Exactly. The United States and its allies should coordinate to derive these organizations of any control of territory and access to financing or resources necessary to conduct the campaigns of violence. Now, this is not what's interesting to me. You can read number 3, but number 4 is what's very interesting. He said the United States and its allies should keep external threats at bay, including malign foreign influences from outside the Western Hemisphere. Think about that for a moment. The allies, which is outside of the Western Hemisphere. Who's outside the Western Hemisphere? China, Russia. Do they have influence in the Western Hemisphere? Yes, in Venezuela, Cuba. What do we see that's happening in Venezuela and Cuba? So basically, a lot of what Trump is doing, has to do with his philosophy. And his philosophy is aligned with a specific religious understanding. So you're going to see here's him saying that it's not about only oil. It's about a philosophical difference, an ideological difference. And again, Patriarch Krill, let's say the Pope of Putin, and you have the Pope here in the West, they see things differently on an ideological level.
They're just evil. It's not the politics, it's their whole philosophy, it's their whole, where they come from. It's terrible. Where they killed 35,000, I thought it was 32.
There is an organization called the Heritage Foundation. It's a Christian organization. It categorizes itself as one of the greatest think tanks in the world. The Heritage Foundation, and it has great influence in American politics. It sets the foundation for what the political arm of the church should do, if you look at deeply into it. And I don't have time to explain everything about the Heritage Foundation. And what it said for Latin America and the Caribbean, it said President Trump has laid out and pursue a vision of U.S. national security that appropriately rises the predominance of the Western Hemisphere for stability. Decades of disengagement have had dramatic consequences for both the U.S. and the hemisphere. Disengagement, which really means the Monroe Doctrine wasn't engaged, facilitating the proliferation of narco terrorism and narco dictatorship. The uncontested surging presence of actors like China and Russia and destabilizing waves of mass migration. But during the 2025 and early 2026, the Trump administration has demonstrated the game-changing effects of the United States' efforts and attention to these challenges. It's explained right there. They aim to keep Russia and China out because of the ideological, philosophical difference. The oil is a strategic move because China has oil. China is using Venezuelan oil, relationship with Venezuela. China has relationship, even we going as far as Iran, but I don't want to go there. China have relationship with Iran for oil. So a lot of these are proxy wars. Whatever is happening with Iran and Venezuela and Cuba, it's proxy to what America aim really is. American aim is China. America's aim is really and surely the AI race with China, the technological race with China. And we tend to pay attention to this, and we tend to pay attention to this, and we tend to get ourselves tied up with the views that tend to be algorithmic, but it doesn't ground itself, because we need to know what's happening. And why should we know what's happening? Because we signed that Shields of America. We should understand that there are certain things America will be funding here. There are certain things America should be funding here. Will be funding here. Yes, there are certain things America will be funding here, because America is more today. America is more about technology, technological dominance, radars, other technology to capture data, other technology to have surveillance of the entire region will be under US surveillance. So they would need infrastructure, they would need technological individual, they would need a lot of data centers. A lot of those things will be coming down the pipeline. It's already in, and I think is in Grenada. I'm going to put the image up. It's in Grenada. I think Grenada said no to putting those US technological equipment on the island. So we need to pay attention to that. Because my point of view is this: it is not only political. Whatever you see is happening there, it's a philosophical, religious, ideological warfare, and it is using the political arm to carry out its mandates. So instead of debating what is going on with the politics, we can understand what is happening underneath the politics, so that we could know how we move. We can know what it is that we're working with. And like I said, it's sadly to say that the algorithm is so strong. The organizations, the watchtowers you call chips, that was placed that was established to really understand those things, are really victims to those things. So we see churches, we see pastors have taken ideological positions. You see people in the churches are very ideological today. It's not about what God says anymore. It's not about what the Bible says anymore. It's about what my algorithm gives me to say. I've been watching both sides of the algorithm. I've been watching the liberal side of the algorithm, and I've been paying attention to the conservative side of the algorithm. And I've been making decisions based on, I've been calling a spade when I see a spade. But there are persons that is so sure about what the video, whoever created in the video, is so correct, because that's how algorithms work. It works based on your past. If you see a video, you've been watching 10 videos saying the same thing, most likely everything that's said in that video is correct, and it is the whole truth. It's nothing but the truth. And we are dividing ourselves as a country. We are dividing ourselves as a region. We are dividing ourselves, and the old divide and conquer. When will the old divide and conquer stop working? So let's pay attention. Let's have debates. If I get something wrong here, I would expect to be pulled up. This was prepared in about 2 days. Just really looking at it, because I've been paying attention to it for a very long time. So I'm just saying the debate on whatever Trump is doing is deeper than just a political move, or hungry for oil, and he only wants money and all of those things. I hear persons so this, and I say, my God, like, let's go deeper, people. Let's go deeper. Let's look at this thing for what it is, so that we could strategize moving forward. It's just not a talk shop to prove my point. I don't want you to have a talk shop just to prove your point. Let's try to get to what's closest to the truth, so that we can organize ourselves as men, organize our families. We can start planting food. If we see something on the horizon, we can start creating our kitchen gardens. The conversation is to build a unifying structure towards finding out what's true in the region. We are very small in the region compared to what's happening, but we are so confused based on what's happening. I'm saying, let's leave politics and let's go deeper. Let's look at it on a deeper level. Thank you for your time and attention.